Okay, guys, thanks for joining us and coming back this afternoon for a special broadcast. I'm very excited for today because anyone that follows me in the background knows how important South Africa is to me personally. It has nothing to do about my heritage and everything to do about friendships I've developed over there. So there's a lot going on in South Africa that is nothing new if you pay attention to that country. Actually, the tip of Africa. If you actually know anything, South Africa is just at the very bottom of the continent Africa. But anyway, so today Breaking's here with me, and I have a special guest. We're going to call him KB. He actually lives in South Africa. So like most of the media here, and we recognize in America here and over the UK, we don't trust the mainstream media. So who better to tell us what's happening over there than someone that actually lives there? So you can say hello, KB, and then we'll let Breaking say hi.
Hi there, everybody. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
You're
And
very
of course, good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? Good to be back here yet again on this Monday.
There you go. Yeah. Got Breaking with me. He's the financial guy. I mean, he's a man of many talents. I don't need to toot his horn. Everybody loves Breaking, but he's a financial guy too. And there's a lot of stuff going on in South Africa. That we'll get into that has to do with China. And again, KB knows what's happening there because he lives there. So Breaking sent me this. I'm going to show you guys a map of South Africa. And I know that probably sounds a little nuts to KB, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know when I did my interview with Bad Boy a couple of years ago, people really don't know. That's South Africa at the very bottom tip of Africa. It's down here at the bottom. So it's a very diverse.
Maybe if you can zoom in on that, you can highlight the two key cities like Cape and Johannesburg.
There's Cape over here.
Where is Johannesburg on that map?
I don't see it. They don't even recognize it on this massive map. But I brought up this. Go ahead.
It's about 50 kilometers south of Pretoria.
Okay.
So down here.
Right underneath Bobane.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to have to extra screen share because I didn't have it up. But just so people can understand, let me change this really quick and go back over here just so everybody understands. Okay, like here in America, when we go into Chinatown, they say, look, it's a foreign language, they're speaking Chinese. When someone speaks French to us in America, they're speaking in a foreign language, it's French. And in South Africa, it's a little different. This is how many languages they have in South Africa. Again, this is just kind of highlighting where South Africa is. I showed you on this map. And this is how many languages that they have there. This is not considered foreign languages. These are all conducive to that part of the continent. And so
those are the 11 official languages.
11 official languages. And so KB sent this to me. You'll see English, the bright blue sliver right here, is not the predominant. We're actually going to talk about the Zulu probably today. You said that Xhosa?
It's actually pronounced it's very difficult to pronounce unless you lived here, but it's pronounced Xhosa. It's like a clicking sound.
Xhosa.
Yeah, it's difficult. It took me a while, and I live here.
Listen, I do good to speak English, okay? So, listen, bear with me. I'll get on here and read, but people are very patient with me. They know that. I used to read to these guys a lot in my early days, and they would tolerate. When I get to a crazy name, I'd just say something like, "Cut myself off," and they'd laugh, and we'd go on. But I just kind of want to say this because it's like I was going to do this today in this show, which is break down some of the history in South Africa, because people I don't think here in America or other places, I'll speak for myself. I didn't understand it until I met Bad Boy 3 years ago. And we would meet every couple of weeks and he broke it down for me. Actually, how diverse what we would probably look at as a small section of land, it actually is. That many languages. What is it? How many tribes are there, KB?
There were effectively 3 dominant tribes, but they about 200 years ago, but they kind of split off and created their own languages. But a lot of them are aligned, and their languages are not too dissimilar from one another. But if you probably find that the two dominant tribes, being the Xhosas and the Zulu, everyone else is kind of rallied around being the other. And politically, you find that the Xhosa are the majority in parliament, and the Zulus have always been more warrior-like, and they're the ones that really got all the arms at the moment. So what you're currently seeing in South Africa, which we're going to touch on a little later, is effectively the previous president, Jacob Zuma, was incarcerated last week, and he was incarcerated because of, he didn't appear before a certain commission to investigate, and it was effectively, he was sentenced without actually being present in a court without a trial. So regardless of what he may or may not have done, we haven't seen, I don't believe, justice. I mean, even if he is guilty, he should have had his day in court. So, there we have it. So currently the violence presumably is around the Zulu faction actually rallying around their leader, which is Jacob Zuma, and wanting to get him out of prison. But as you know, any excuse, why let a good crisis go to waste? As we all know, that's a leftist doctrine. And most of the political parties here are well left of center, if not Marxist. So
I was going to say, before she shares this article, can you give a little color around Jacob Zuma? What got us to this point with him suddenly finding himself on the inside of the pen, as it were?
Well, it's basically a contempt of court charge. That's really why he's been incarcerated. And there were investigations around, look, just like most of the communist, socialist dictatorships and countries around the world, I mean, it's a free fall when it comes to stealing assets, whether it's taxpayer money, state assets, land. He is probably looks like that he's guilty of those things, but he's no less guilty than the current incumbent. So, and largely people seem to forget that there's a major foreign influence on most countries around the world. And the British particularly have got a long history of involvement in South Africa and funding various nefarious regimes around, well, certainly in South Africa, for example, Zimbabwe. And what are they after? They're after the resources. So now what we have is a power play with foreign forces. Let's call it the UK, to a lesser extent now, the US, and to a great extent Europe. They want South African resources. So perhaps later on, Laura will actually show a video that indicates what the rationale is behind what they're doing. We've also got the Chinese now, which effectively own the ports. And currently in the area which is, let's call it Zulu land, there's the huge rare earth mineral deposits there, coincidentally, particularly iridium. So what you're finding is on the face of it, it looks like tribalism, but behind it, there's major foreign influence in wanting this thing to erupt. And it's effectively a power play. We've got some of the biggest gas deposits in the world just off the east coast of Africa. So there's gas. Interestingly enough, Mozambique, which was a neighboring country just to the north on the eastern side, that's where we've seen a lot of the Islamic militants hitting there. And it's really
Well,
all about
hang on one second. Just to go back before we get too far away, but if memory serves me correctly, Zuma, there was always allegations about Zuma for pretty much his entire presidency. But when he really got into a lot of hot water was whenever those Gupta, if I memory serves me, it was the Zuma was started affiliating himself with this Gupta, these pair of brothers from India. And they came into South Africa and started getting in all these different business deals. And they were really nefarious, if I remember. Didn't Zuma get caught up with the Guptas?
Yes, definitely, without a doubt. But I think it's one of those instances where that's the noisy part that they want you to have a look at when the real theft is happening at the other end. In comparison to what the Zuma and Guptas and that faction stole, it pales in insignificance to what really been going on in other parts of the country, particularly the current regime, because that's really what they are. They have major influence over particularly the minerals. Platinum is a big thing. That's what the UK are really after. Europe are after platinum. And now we know that the rare earth deposits here are massive. So
I guess
Chinese also.
So I guess to kind of sum things up, it's your typical exploitation of resources. And of course, you have your usual bribes, your kickbacks, general corruption, and, just the typical stuff the clowns in America have done for, decades. And maybe as we get through some of the prepared material here, we can kind of circle back on how the likes of China's One Belt, One Road, Silk Road initiative kind of squares into that.
I'm going to take a pause right now, and I'm going to show some of the videos of what currently is happening to South Africa. And these are like the Zulus that are protesting his incarceration, want him released. And so this is like just an article that has I have some others that KB has sent me that I'll have to show as well, but I have to share my entire Telegram, as you know. But this is just some of them, what's happening. Okay, they're trying to stop fire.
Don't waste your ammo. Yeah, it says stop.
Let them come. So they're trying to shut them down. Then you have this. Does this look familiar, Americans?
At the moment, what we are watching is a shop. We are watching people who are walking out with things like fridges, beds. I mean, Britain, they're walking out with furniture now. So it has gone from food to clothing to furniture. There's a shop that they're trying to hit at the moment. We understand it's food lovers. They're also coming out of their Britain. The whole mall has been looted. When we arrived here, the police were shooting, and they were also getting stones that were coming back at them. But now the police are actually just standing, also trying to get them out on the other side of the mall where there's normally.
Well, so there you go. That looks familiar. Here's another one. Now this looks very familiar over here if you live in the wrong city. And I don't know. Maybe you two can talk about what's happening here, because you are financial people. I'm going to share without my sound. This is the reaction in markets was pronounced in the rand, and it looked just freaking bottomed out.
Well, the currency lost immediately 2% at the open of the markets this morning. And just to give you a perspective of the South African stock market, in the early 80s, it was the fourth largest by market cap in the world. So, I mean, there's massive wealth underneath the ground here. And that's really been actually the story of the demise, really, of South Africa, particularly, just to give you an idea, if you go back to 1860 when gold was discovered, the British were about to leave. In fact, Lord Kitchener said that it's time to leave the Dust Bowl of Africa. And that's exactly when they found, it's amazing how they changed their minds the minute gold was discovered. And probably some of the biggest reefs in the world, if not the biggest. So, yeah, South Africa also has you don't have to go too deep, because some of these reefs run at an angle. And yes, while we do have some of the deepest mines in the world, it's not that difficult to mine. And coincidentally, more or less at the same time, they found diamonds in Kimberley. And in fact, the Queen's Cullinan diamond comes from South Africa. It's massive. I can't recall how many carats it is. So a lot of the wealth has found its way outside of the borders of South Africa, and certainly not to the benefit of any of the people here.
Yeah, and of course, gold, you almost have to laugh at the hypocrisy of it all, because central banks, anybody who pays attention to the financiers, the banksters, etc., know that many central banks actually carry gold on hand. And if they believe so 100% in their fiat currency, why in the world would they have to have backup reserves of, say, gold?
This is an image that I want to do two things here. First, I'm going to show you what they're talking about. This is an image that me and Bad Boy used back even 2 years ago about like the land grab. This is the 21st century African land rush. Notice down here, South Africa, it doesn't even have in this mix, but I'm sure they're not separate from it. This massive chunk of land that the Chinese bought just deep in the Congo. Again, because why? Africa is mineral rich. Not just about the gold either, it's about their minerals. That's why they're going after certain farmers. It's not just white farmers. That the Chinese came knocking for their money. Africa borrowed a lot of money from them. They wanted some of their money back. And so what the government didn't have any to give them. So they started acting like they wanted to reclaim these farms for the Black Africans, when the reality is they wanted the minerals on these farms, because that's the only thing they had of value, if memory serves me correctly. And before we go on, I'm going to, because KB has sent me a lot of stuff. I cannot hide this, by the way, so it is what it is. I have to show it in Telegram. I have no other choice to bring it up this way because I wish I did, but I do not. So I'm going to have to share this and hurry up with this. Okay, so that I mean, as you can imagine, Africa does not have the, it's not like they're teeming in a bunch of abundant water. So there was one more. Oh, this is this.
That's a prison break in, yeah.
That's a prison break. If you couldn't hear KB, this is the prison break. I mean, it's going crazy over there. I mean, it really is. So I thought there was one more. I showed this one already. Did you want me to show this one about we must keep Africa poor?
Yes, I think that puts things in perspective from a global, and the reason why we've seen, as I said, the UK, the US to a lesser extent, and the Europeans, why are they after Africa? So perhaps if you could just
hang on, KB. They can't hear you while this is playing. I'll let it play, and then you give your feedback after it's done, okay? Because It's playing. They can't hear you while it's playing. Hang on, I'll let it go again.
I don't think you shared your audio.
Is it not sharing the audio?
I hear nothing,
That's weird. Here, let me try again. Here we go.
Vital for the
better.
Yep.
Okay. Try it again. Sorry, live.
Historically, sub-Saharan Africa has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay, and Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures all the global institutions and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, but this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay? And that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight. Okay, so this is what it's fundamentally about. What I want to show you is how these structures are operating. It's just 20 minutes, so we can't do very much, but just to give you a little bit of an idea. And why I keep the ideology part there is because we are part of the producers of ideology. At universities and academic institutions, we are complicit in this whole enterprise. Okay, so the job of many Western academics is to convince Africans they have to keep doing what they're doing. Okay, and to show them it's your fault that you're poor. It's not our fault. It's your fault that you're poor. You know, so this is what we do in academic institutions, and I want to show that as well.
Wow. 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 I mean, at least he laid it out there.
Well, and of course, you have to consider what corporations do, and the likes of the clowns in America with elections where they have gone in and stolen elections, installed their regimes, exploited the mineral resources, things of that nature are for the benefit of the corporations because it's always profit over people, right?
Look at where America strategically places its military bases. It's awful funny that Africa doesn't have a pot to piss in or window to throw it out of, what we told us the narrative anyway. But yet we have somehow managed to put a military base over in South Africa. What are we doing over in South? What are we protecting in South Africa? Because we're not helping the people.
Effectively, you are in Africa. I mean, if you look at the north, what has happened, I was in the military too at some point 40 years ago, and we managed to advance into Angola and virtually take over the country. And then I couldn't understand why we retreated. And really it came out a few years later that we got basically instructions from the CIA to get out, largely because to the west of Angola, we'd gone past Luanda. We've gone, which is right up north of the country, and you notice that the biggest export of Angola today is oil. So, you know, the US influence has been there. We know that Congo, somehow probably the one decent leader they had was assassinated, interestingly enough. And if you go to the north of Africa, you'll have a look. What were the US troops doing in Iraq? You know, it's oil again. And what did Hillary and Blair from the UK, what were they doing in Libya?
Tony Blair.
You know, so there's the north of Africa again. It's all about oil, and Libya had a lot of gold.
Yeah, not to mention that Gaddafi, of course, was trying to set up a currency within Africa that basically bypassed, the Rothschild banking system. And of course, they had to construct a narrative around that and why Gaddafi was bad, right?
Yeah, they were going to have the gold dinar, and
Yep.
Interestingly enough, the two things that Saddam and Gaddafi had in common was the fact that Saddam, interestingly, before he got taken out, was wanting to switch his sales of oil into euros as opposed to the dollar, or the petrodollar, and Libya was going their own way with the gold-backed currency, effectively. In
Actually,
fact,
am I getting those two confused? Is that Hussein or is that Gaddafi that was going after the dinar?
Gaddafi.
Gaddafi. Okay, that's right.
And what you'll find is that the gold has, interestingly enough, disappeared from Libya.
Funny, we came, he saw, we died. Right,
Yeah,
Hillary?
Well, I will tell you, as everyone knows, my litany of stuff that I always have pulled up at the top of my search, and I showed this to, I think, to you gentlemen the other day. One of the things that is in this is this interview right here that is amazing. It's done by John B. Wells, the Caravan. This couple was in Libya when all that went down, and I have not been able to find a better account of that situation, about how it was before Hillary Clinton visited and what happened after she left. And, you can say whatever you want to do about the man that was running that country, but they were living pretty daggum good lives. And then she came, and then all hell broke loose. So, yeah, I have no doubt we deal with a lot of greedy people.
So KB, I don't know if you can touch upon this as far as resources net are concerned in South Africa. We know that there's a huge push as all this Green New Deal ties into Agenda 2030 and all that good stuff. One thing that we know with the batteries net that go into a lot of these EVs, whether they be Tesla vehicles or what have you, a lot of lithium and so forth. We since find out that a lot of this lithium is done through child labor. We've seen that in Africa, especially. Is that also the case down in South Africa, or is that more to the north?
To a lesser extent in South Africa, there are lithium deposits, but nothing as massive as the Congo.
Right.
So the Congo is really where the big deposits of lithium here. We've got iridium, which I'm not quite sure, but I do believe has got some kind of use for batteries.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've come across something recently and it escapes the top of my mind what iridium, the big usage for that is here as of late. Yeah, it escapes me, but it's going to be in pretty decent demand, let's put it that way, as their plans and that are laid out, the Davos types, the Great Reset. And of course, you guys are going to learn to do more with less, of course.
Guess who bought up this massive piece of land, the majority of it? China. What he's talking about in the Congo?
It's not that
China.
They bought it. They wheeled in with something like the Belt and Road. They sweetened the pot, gave them all these cheap loans, fully knowing that many of these countries cannot pay said loans back. And when they default on said loans, they just steal the resources, whether it be mine sites, whether it be ports, whatever.
Well, I would say land acquisition is pretty much the same thing. There's the map. There's the Chinese flag over the Congo.
Yeah, they're basically doing the same thing as what our clowns in action here do, just coming from the east in a little bit different fashion.
They invested
the other
7 million acres. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was sorry I interrupted. I was going to add that one of the biggest things, and you see it to an extent in the US, the Chinese need a big food supply. So South Africa and, well, particularly Zimbabwe, which is just the neighbor to the north. Zimbabwe used to be known 30 years ago as the breadbasket of Africa. I mean, whatever you put into the ground grew. I mean, if you put a pair of shoes in, you would have got a shoe store. Anything grows in Zimbabwe. It's the most arable land, and as is most of South Africa. So what we found is that they're now going. That's one of the other reasons for killing the farmers, to get them off the land. So nothing convinces people to leave the land than getting murdered. So there's an agenda behind that. It's not just what people would ordinarily just see, you know, that it's a land distribution because of previous, history, etc., etc. It's a lot of garbage. I mean, it's just a front to get the Chinese their land. And in fact, we've got some, just here where I live in the Cape, we've got amazing dairies, okay? And now some of those dairies, you can't even give them away, which is exactly what they wanted to do. That you get the price dropped, people are looking to leave, and you snap up that that land for very little. And notwithstanding the fact that there's a land distribution campaign going on by the government, which is to take away your land without compensation. And interestingly enough, during this pandemic, that they try to pass a bill in Parliament to do just that. Take your land without compensation.
Well, I think too, what a lot of people don't know about South Africa is that you have vineyards that grow in South Africa. They're right alongside, you know, the more prestigious neighborhoods, from what I remember in my interview a couple of years ago. But you have a lot of like vineyards down there, right? In Cape Town, around Cape Town.
Very much so. Just probably about 40 kilometers north of Cape Town, there's an area called, well, there are two areas. Franschhoek is one, which basically translated means French corner, and Stellenbosch. And those are probably the premier growing areas in the country, much like what you've got in California.
Mm-hmm. So I just showed this map while you guys were talking. I don't know if you noticed, but as you were saying that, I was showing the land grab. You literally brought up Zambia. I call it Zambia. Zimbabwe. I guess that's different then, because that's Zambia. 4.9 million acres requested for biofuel. That's not for biofuel. I mean, you know what biofuel is? Basically, they have to strip the land of every tree that's grown on it. Why would you strip the land of a treeless property unless you were trying to use it to grow something? Because it says right here they took see, I'm not going to pronounce these right. Tanzania,
yeah.
Thank you. 741 acres for rice. But yeah, so this is another 800 million investment to quintuple the rice production. So I mean, but it's not just China. It's look at all these countries like just jockeying to get into Africa. Look, has firms with land, Sudan, 1 million acres acquired. It doesn't even tell you what for. At least the other ones will lie to you, tell you it's for biofuel. But yeah, I think that while everyone's being distracted, like here in America, from like the riots, stuff like that, there's actually more nefarious things happening in the background. I wanted to show this as well, because this is one of the last things that you had sent me. Again, sorry, I have to share my whole screen, but that's the only way I can share a Telegram video. But I'm trying to hurry. But this is, you can't really hear him, but it's really not about that. It's about the video of what he shares about what's currently happening there. I mean, they are burning the place down. And it reminds me of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots we had over here. Well, they just set everything on fire. That's horrifying. Do you know where that is, KB?
Yes, it's on the east coast, near Durban, or Richards Bay, which is the big. Well, it's arguably the biggest port south of the equator.
So that's at a port, and I think you mentioned that earlier, where you're not in control of your ports anymore. And that's one thing that Trump did when he got into office was, we had the same issue with people controlling our ports. They're trying to.
Did they say what the cause of that particular fire was?
No, I'm not quite sure. I also sent a video of, they're setting fire to everything and looting all the malls.
Yeah.
They've also, I think I sent a video of a carrier with a car carrier.
Yeah, I'm going to show you that.
Yeah.
He sent me several. I showed some the other day, but this is one of them. I won't share more about the audio. And it's pretty, again, graphic. So there's your graphic warning. They came there to try and rob this establishment. They were ambushed by the civilians. There's a loud horn in the background.
That was a liquor store.
Lying dead in the middle of the street. Yeah, they said they tried to steal liquor. I mean, that's horrific.
I guess real quick where I was going with that previous video is I wonder if there's any linkage to what's been going on with some of these other I think there was a port in that in Saudi Arabia that just had a little fire in that was linked to either a container ship or perhaps even an oil tanker. We had an oil tanker over in Romania that caught fire here recently. We had underwater fire over around Mexico here as of late. If it's all part of the same stuff, you know, you kind of pick up on some of these patterns where you recognize that their sole goal, the globalists, is to try and shut everything down worldwide to prohibit any sort of traveling pertaining to fossil fuels, oils, natural gas, you name it.
It's certainly not a coincidence. And the other thing that you can see the pattern with is disrupting the supply chains, particularly food.
Yep.
And now they're talking about a third wave of COVID coming in.
Third? No, we're past that.
In South Africa.
Yeah, they've locked us down here. We've got a curfew from 9 p.m. in the evening till 6 a.m. in the morning. So, yeah, they've actually, the other thing that's quite nefarious that's happened is that a month ago, we had one decent Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, and interestingly enough, he decided to retire, or was persuaded to retire. And the chap who was investigating all these crimes, nudge, nudge, he happened to be put in charge of the Constitutional Court. And the minute that happened, that's when they effectively arrested the previous president.
Well, I mean, you got this guy lurking around over there. I have no doubts that it's filled with corruption and the third wave of something. And I mean, what this man did, I cannot believe this man is even welcomed in Africa. What he's done to Africa and India by testing the medications. I have went over that 30 days for 30 minutes a couple months ago and went slap off on how he's used the African people as guinea pigs. It's
especially Kenya.
Yeah, freaking disgusting. He is disgusting. Yeah, I saw that. You'd sent me that. And I thought, well, that doesn't shock. You know, he's supposedly kicked out of India, but I believe they've let him back in. Did you also, there was a video you'd sent for Homesteader with the man in looks like the reddish pink tie. Did you want me to show that as well?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, I can share my whole thing. Here we go.
We will use our leadership and membership of SADC, our membership of BRICS, and the G20, the Commonwealth, and many other international bodies to forge a new world order founded on equality.
Well, there's your new world order for the day.
Help square something for me here, KB. I thought the whole idea behind BRICS was to avoid having to go through the IMF, World Economic Forum, the World Bank, all that stuff. I thought Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they basically had formed that alliance, probably better than a decade ago now, to basically bypass having to buy oil, transfer everything through US dollars, and that after the Bretton Woods Agreement and all that good stuff, where everything has to go through US dollars before countries can transact with one another.
Well, that was in theory, but as you love saying, and I think it's one of your best sayings, for those who are paying attention, the UK has had the most massive influence over this part of the world for best part of a century. And the UK has had this massive influence, and it was almost like an infiltration of BRICS. That's the way I see it. So nothing's really come of it. They were supposed to have a developmental bank established, etc., etc. But I think the Russians and the Brazilians got a little bit smart, perhaps to a lesser extent the Indians. But yeah, that hasn't really taken off.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I had been led to believe otherwise. Maybe that was just all smoke and mirrors at the end of the day. But, along those lines, you kind of think about what has taken place in Iran, with all the sanctions and everything else. As when Trump came in, we immediately got out of the JCPOA. All the business that 44 had set up to do what we did in Iran after shoveling plane loads of cash their way in the dark of night. And then, of course, they says, all right, well, if you guys are going to sanction us, then we're going to basically get outside the SWIFT system and form our own interbank way of talking to one another so that we can avert any sort of sanctions out of the Treasury and that here in the U.S. So any thoughts on that, on how, I guess, South Africa interacts? Are they potentially in on that as well?
I'm not certain of that, but you mentioned 44. He was here in 2019 while President Trump was in power, and that was where that speech that you heard, that was actually the current president of South Africa addressing that conference in Kenya that 44 was at. I think I sent you that as well, Laura. So yeah, it's all connected. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. 44 also came to South Africa during a speech that was made much along the same lines. So there's been a lot of interaction. We've even had the pleasure of having Epstein and Bill here on a little visit to Cape Town on a private jet. So there's a lot of connections that, whether it be Gates or Epstein or Clinton. The Clinton Foundation was here. A lot of connections from all of these global entities that are really not looking out for the best interest of humanity at large.
Was that the same trip that 44 also is trying to persuade? Well, I forget which country it was in Africa now. That he was trying to persuade the leadership over there of gay rights and everything else. And they kind of looked at him like, yeah, we're not going to do that.
It probably wouldn't have surprised me, but I'm not entirely sure.
So I guess from a financial standpoint, how is South Africa set up? Are they along the lines of like Zimbabwe? They've sat and watched their currency fail in that a number of times over the last decade. I sit here with a $10 trillion Zimbabwe note in my hand here, and of course it's barely worth pennies. I guess is South Africa at this point suffering the same fate as what Zimbabwe has done by inflating away their wealth and, of course, having to add some more zeros to the back end of their currency?
Not at the same pace as we haven't depreciated at the same pace that the Zimbabwe dollar did. I think the wealth, you'll notice that there's quite a strong correlation with the precious metals prices and the South African currency, but it has. I recall when I finished school, which was in the late 70s, we could buy a dollar for less than a rand. So in other words, $1 would buy you probably 80 South African cents at the end of 78, 79. Mm-hmm. And currently, $1 will get you 14 rand. So look at that percentage drop. Yes, it is over 40 years, but the pace has been, I suppose, accelerated over the last 20 since, there's been a regime change here.
Yeah, and of course, that's just talking about the currency exchange rates and how people trade against that. And of course, if you look at it here stateside, one of the measures we look at the dollar as is in terms of gold. Gold currently, I think this morning, my morning said we're somewhere around $1,800 an ounce, but you got to really think opposite that. You got to flip the script and put one over that. Gold value hasn't changed. It's the fact that the dollar has depreciated against it. And of course, you've heard me a number of times say that since 2020, when all this COVID crap started, the Fed has been busily printing cash out of thin air, 120 billion a month. And in no period in time in history since the dawn of the Federal Reserve have we put more currency in circulation than over the last almost 18 months now. So
it's much the same. If I'm actually going to try and find a chart as we speak, but if you were a South African investor and put $1,000 worth into gold, physical gold, even coins, in 1980, and you had a look at it 40 years later, the return in South African currency terms has been the best investment you could ever have made. So I'm going to actually try, while you're chatting, I'm going to try and call up a chart on that if I can.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's some other folks in that I follow as well that basically paint the same scenario, that in terms of how the US dollar stacks up against gold, we are greatly depreciated against it compared to most other countries outside of the country here. If you look at it over the last 2 years or so, gold and that has greatly outpaced the US dollar in terms of value for every other currency that's pegged against it. Or actually, I should take that back. We're nobody's really technically pegged to gold. Everybody's pegged to the US dollar.
I'm trying to find one that goes back far enough. It actually says maximum. Okay. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to try and share the screen.
While you're doing that, I'll answer somebody in chat here. Says nothing is legit. Even gold and silver is being manipulated. Yes, you're absolutely right. We know that the banksters and that have been caught behind the scenes a number of times over the years, and behind the scenes chats, they've gotten caught with their hand in the cookie jar. They get the typical slap on the wrist, but there is something that is coming up that could help thwart that, and it remains to be seen how this is going to play out, and that's the Basel III. The Basel Bank is the central bank of central banks, and it remains to be seen how exactly this is going to play out by getting rid of derivatives and everything else, EFTs, all that stuff as it pertains to gold, silver, and how everything's allocated from there forward.
Just to give you an idea, this is the longest term chart I could find on short notice, but effectively over 10 or 11 years, if you'd invested 5,000 Rand, which probably 10 years ago would have been the equivalent of about probably $1,000, you would have now got 2,500. So, I mean, it's a 500% return in 10 years in local currency terms. So that just shows you what kind of depreciation we've seen on our currency, if you want to use that as a benchmark.
Yep.
Well, I also don't want to skip over. We had this conversation too to make everyone clear. You probably have a great conversation with Daddy Dragon as well, but who we talked about, who you believe basically still controls Africa.
To a large extent, really. I think the biggest influence over particularly South Africa, Zimbabwe, is certainly the UK, without doubt.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree. Its influence is, it's like breaking. We can have the conversation about even its influence here in America. It's major when it's never really left. We were given the facade of, I believe, having a war and winning the battle, but at the end of the day, they always figured out a way to wiggle into our judicial system, the Federal Reserve.
Yeah,
they still pretend they control everything.
And of course, we said too, there's just some weird anomalies that if you pay attention to what is happened over the last several years. There's some weird things that have played out, like the fact that when Trump met with the Queen, as is normal pomp and circumstance, usually any world leader trails behind her. He walked boldly in front of her, which is kind of a no-no in customs and norms. Then you also look at like back in 2017 when Trump made his whirlwind tour and that after the Vegas deal, where he went over to China, met with Xi Jinping in the Forbidden City. No other leader stateside here has ever done that. What was discussed would like to have been a fly on the wall in that regard. Head over to Saudi Arabia, and of course, you got him with his hands on the mystical globe. What happened there? Head over to Israel, have some discussions there. And last but not least, head over to the Vatican and meet up with the old Pope, who looked less than pleased to see Trump and Melania and Ivanka and company all there. They, of course, had big smiles on their face, and old Popey looked like he could have rather been under a rock. So it begs the question, what was really the premise of that trip, and what are we really watching play out here? If you follow some of the stuff out there, there's thoughts that perhaps, they had the goods on every single one of these and they put an end to it. And we're just watching the rest of this play out. And supposedly, we talked about this the other day as well. I think it was what was it, July-ish time frame when the statement was made via Q Post and that the Treasury basically has now merged with the Fed. Meet your new Fed president, Donald J. Trump. That was in an article. And so what are we really watching play out here?
It was late March last year.
Late March, that's right.
Yeah, I think 27th, if I'm not mistaken. It just happened to coincide with the first lockdown, 2 weeks to flatten the curve that we all heard. So another coincidence that I'm sure is just purely a coincidence, when the current president took power, within a couple of weeks, his first port of call was the UK. And I kept on saying he'd probably gone to get his marching orders. And interestingly enough, just prior to the most recent lockdown, which was a month ago, he also just happened to be, I'm sure you saw the videos of Biden trying to introduce him a couple of times, and the president was there in the UK, which was quite interesting because it was a G7 meeting, and South Africa is not part of the G7. So what was he doing there, other than, I guess, to follow orders? Yeah. But that's pure speculation on my part.
Yeah, same here. All we can do is sit back and watch and look for some of these interesting details that kind of stick out like a sore thumb if you have a keen eye toward it.
Macron said when they sat down that he was happy that they finally had somebody who was back on the team, back part of the club, when they sat down next to Biden. So yeah, I think, I don't care what you think about Obama or Clinton or Bush or Trump or any of the previous presidents. Okay, you can have your issues with their policies, what side of the aisle they sit on. At least they could form complete sentences. Okay, you can have whatever issue you want to on their policies, but we now have a wet noodle with a nuclear football. It is an embarrassment to our country. The man is an embarrassment to the damn country.
Does anybody actually confirm that Biden actually does indeed have the nuclear football?
I was going to raise.
He doesn't know his wife's name half the time. He turns over and looks at his sister and calls his wife. This man is not. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and I think every American would agree. Again, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, middle of the road, red, yellow, black, or white. I don't care. Everybody has got to admit, when you see this man do oppressor, it is embarrassing that they think that this is who we elected to run this country. I hope that no one in their wildest dreams would I don't know. They tried to impeach Trump, 4 times? And we had the man stand on stage and say that Americans, if they wanted to push back against their government, would need F-15s and nuclear weapons, basically making the comment that he would use our own military against us if we pushed against the tyranny of our own government. The kind of Swalwell made the same comment 2 years ago. But you can impeach Trump over get two scoops of ice cream or saying something weird on Twitter. that this idiot, I don't know, nothing bothers me more than talking about this again. This man, forget his policies, forget what he's doing at the, don't forget it, but I mean, you know what I mean, what he's doing at the border, what he's doing with our relationships with other countries. The man can't form a complete sentence. So if that doesn't alert everyone that these are figments, that they're placed there to sit down in a chair and smile, none of them are running a damn thing. If you want to look to who's running shit, look to the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds or the Kissingers of the world, fine. But if you think Biden can tie his own shoes, much less know how to run a country, I implore you to go watch 3 clips that he's done in the last week. He is a stooge on a stage.
I guess to that end, that was just in an article yesterday. It says U.S. military tank is listed on a popular auction site. I think it was called Bring a Trailer or something like that. So, hey, if you got a little bit of change laying around, maybe you can pick up an old school tank, or I don't know, maybe an M1 Abrams. Take your pick.
You have the right to bear arms. It doesn't say which ones.
Exactly.
Well, listen, we have people in America that collect tanks. We have a man that has more military aircraft as a personal collection. The actual military contracts him to do military test runs. And he has more aircraft than you could imagine. And I mean, fighter pilots, stuff like that kind of. But yeah, so we have a lot of people here that collect a lot of military stuff that's still operational, by the way. Of course, they don't have access to the missiles that they're loaded into them or their 50 caliber bullets or whatever, but they still have them.
From where I sit, going back to your point about your current president, for me, it looks suspiciously like 44 got his wish of controlling the president from the basement.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element to that. Nobody really knows for sure who his handler is. I think many of us would all agree that many of our presidents and that since probably, I don't know if I dare say go back to 1791, have all been puppets on a string at the end of the day. But there's folks that say Ron Klain, maybe one of the handlers. There's folks that say it's Jill. There's folks that say it's Kamala. There's folks that say it's, the combination of Valerie Jarrett and 44, ultimately all leading back to Soros and company. I mean, at the end of the day, that little 4-year blip that we had known as DJT was just a little speed bump in the 16-year plan.
Which they've seemed to put on fast forward at the moment.
And they're making a lot of mistakes, which at the same time, we're privy to and see this all happening. And because of that, in true dark to light fashion, it gives us an opportunity to thwart them left and right. And that's exactly what we're doing, exposing their misdeeds. And hopefully there's enough time to save ourselves from them.
Well, we do know that the pandemic wasn't scheduled to happen when it did, but it was planned for a couple of years into the future. But here we are.
Yeah. I mean, it's just funny with all the simulations that they put forward, how they mysteriously just happen to go live, whether it be Event 201, whether it be Department of Homeland Security stuff around 9/11, 2001, whether it happened to be a little exercise net they did out in Vegas that happened to play out where they had FBI agents there for a week before and some foreigners net over here running drills and things of that nature. Coincidentally, all around the Harvest 91 event and that took place. It's just a coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I wanted to bring up one other thing as well that we really didn't hit much on, which I didn't get to talk much about in my conversations with. We did hit on it a little bit, but we talked off air about like the ANC and the EFF, kind of like what Antifa and the Riders of Black Lives Matter are here in America. They are there in South Africa. And to understand, but there's actual leaders. So there's, the Black Lives Matter had the 3 Marxist women that led the Black Lives Matters. Antifa will constantly claim they're not organized, even though they have different factions in different parts of the country and they have their own Twitter accounts, but they're not organized. But what brought this up for me is I actually tried to do a little research last night on some current information that's happening there. And I showed this to you before we went live. But this is just to highlight the leader of this is the EFF, I believe. This is the one. I might be getting this wrong. It might be okay. This just goes to show they treat this man like a celebrity when he pulls up. And the first song out of his mouth, let me make sure I'm sharing audio. The first thing out of his mouth, he gets on stage and sings, is what brought South Africa to highlight for me back a couple years ago after the Trump tweet and all that was going on with the farmers.
Minds.
We are going to take that belongs to
One of the EFF rallies.
They've become controversial for singing an apartheid rebellion song, Shoot the Boer, Kill the Farmer.
The Boer is the white farmer in South Africa.
FIFA, EFF, FIFA.
From old women to little kids, they're all screaming, leave EFF.
Just because there's now a black government doesn't mean poor black Africans aren't still suffering or angry.
We're going on my income. I got no money.
The when he arrived.
Yeah.
Look at that, look, it's mad.
When their commander-in-chief Julius Malema turns up, he gets a welcome that David Cameron could only dream of.
Now, this is the part where, what's the first thing he does? The first thing this documentary shows he does, and I'll give the British guy credit. He does highlight it and kind of call a mockery to him changing a word of it. Okay, that's the praising.
You need to come to Marikana on the 13th. Now you must not sit back. Come on, sir. Who loves guitar? Hello, kiss the boy, the farmer.
Kiss, what he say? Kiss the boy, farmer, and then they're going bang, bang. Because that's what you say when you kiss someone, is do a motion of a handgun and bang, bang. Yeah, that sounds like love to me. Think pie.
The whole time I've been here, I've heard about this Kill the Boer song. Clearly, Malema has become hip to that because, you know, it's something that's really sensitive to the Boer and Afrikaans population out here. He's now changed the words of the song to Kiss the Boer. The funny thing is, that's quickly followed by people going pow pow. Different words, pretty much the same meaning, huh?
Yeah, and the reason why I feel like that little smirk at the end, you almost think that he is being, like sympathizing with it. But before in this documentary, he actually goes, what a lot of people don't realize too, let me mute this down, just play some of the video, is he actually just goes to one of the, these white camps where all these white people are basically squatting in a park, and it's pretty sad, really. I mean, and you can tell it kind of gets to him that later on in this video they talk about this guy right here. I think he's like a welder, and he's got his wife and his 3 kids are living there, and they talk about how now there's a what is it called? We call it here in college breaking, help me, where they in South Africa now they're making it basically mandatory that you have to have employ so many black people, appropriations, and so there's now several white people that can't find jobs because it's pretty one-sided. It's not like even an equity thing or equal thing. It's pretty rough. But he camps out here. He pitches a tent and he stays around. This guy was I think he was a famous musician, and now he's living there. So he does spend time there, and then he goes, he does his due diligence. But I just thought it was interesting that the leader of the EFF comes out, gets out of his car, treated like a celebrity, and then that's the first thing out of his mouth is to sing the Kiss the Boer. And I don't believe that's the kiss he would kiss. What, kiss of death? So I think, KB, if you have a minute to try and explain what that is.
Well, I mean, I think there was a video that I sent you it's it looks, the opening shot is a floor of Parliament, and it was actually from the Times of London. And that narrative will kind of explain it to you quite well, where this is probably the only country in the world where the minority are, if you want to just break it down in racial terms, the demographic is roughly about 8 or 9% white South Africans, and they've been discriminated against in the job market. So it's probably the only country in the world where you're actually seeing companies having to have, well, the left likes to call it equality, but effectively you don't get a job based off your experience or knowledge or ability. You're more likely to get it based off the color of your skin.
Yeah, I felt one that you'd sent me. Well, you sent me quite a stuff, but this was the Sowton Live, the ANC, the EFF playing political tricks.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, what the EFF is really the militant arm of the government. So it's kind of like, if you go back, anyone who just has a look at history, Antifa was formed in the 30s, and Antifa was the militant arm of the communists. So that's what they've always been. Nothing's changed. Antifa is an organization that goes back to Germany, and where Hitler had his brown shirts, displacing the police, much like what they're trying to do to you guys there. The brown shirts were actually the ones that were fighting against Antifa. So it was really a socialist stroke communist war that was going on with virtually their private armies. And effectively, what the EFF has allowed the government to do, or the ANC at large, is to stand back and have their noisy children making all those racist remarks. They never reprimand them, though. So it's kind of like they get these sub-organizations to do the dirty work for them.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are similar to what's going on here. It's just, the name of the organization may change, but it seems like the outcome is they're trying to make the outcome the same. But yeah, it's so complicated over in South Africa, as far as and we'll get into this in another show. There's just too much to get into about the history of the tribes of South Africa that fought alongside the Boers. The Boers, that there was land acquired in South Africa in many different ways, but it's just not like all these white people coming and took over. I mean, most of these white Boer farmers were there before the people that are now trying to claim the land as theirs. They were there, a couple hundred years before some of these people. So.
Particularly in the south and west of the country. If you go back to that map that shows the languages, there's a reason for that. You'll see that none of the tribal languages are spoken here, because as much as we know that the left like to revise history to suit their narrative, you see, if you go back there, look at that pale blue, how big that is as a percentage of the country. And if you go right down to where Cape Town is, where it says English and Xhosa, there were no tribes there. There was, if anyone does have claim to being there first, I guess there's a nomadic tribe called the Khoisan. And they were much like the Bushmen, which is not a derogatory term, by the way, of the Southwest Africa and Namibia. These people are nomadic people. They live off the land, and they travel in their small communities, and literally maybe as probably a maximum of 20 of them. But they're seasonal, and I guess to some extent similar to the way the Indians were in the US, they'd follow the bison and they'd move around. So I suppose there is a parallel there, but and those communities that were here if one can say that they had established communities, which they didn't, they were perhaps the only ones that were here prior to any of the settlers coming in.
Yeah, and I just realized that the E and G, little tiny little flecks of English speakers are like along the coast.
Yeah.
That's weird. The tiny little pocket right here. And there's it looked like two bigger masses over here. But yeah, that's kind of crazy. But from what I understand though, that the English speaking, would you consider every English speaking, the English speaking to represent the Boers here or no?
No. Afrikaans is really the language that is spoken because they were descendants of the Dutch. So bear in mind as well that historically the Dutch East India Company was probably second only to the to the UK, and they had big presence in Asia. And they came down here because this was the trade route through to India. So the Dutch have also got their reasons for being here. And, it's no coincidence that the original Afrikaners or Boers, their language is a derivative of Dutch. Okay, yeah, that's the map that shows migration. And there was massive migration from the north. And we can get into that another time. But effectively, you'll see that what I was talking about, that big blank white area that's under Cape Province, was largely uninhabited. So anyone, is under the illusion that this was teeming with black folk is wrong.
Yeah, and from what I understood too, everyone lived really peacefully side by side, and so I think it's important for me to say that it's not like every, and again, the term they use in South Africa is colored, so don't come after me, you two, but the different factions of the tribes, they lived alongside the Boer peacefully, and they got along well. It's not like every black person in Africa or South Africa is against the white people. It wasn't like that. They farmed together and stood beside each other for a long time. It's these certain groups that are pushing for this, removal of white farmers, if you will.
In fact, the majority of people, and this is a significant majority of people, are worse off under this black government than they were prior to them taking over in 94. So, I mean, their delivery system hasn't been there for water, basic electricity, the education standards, which are probably the worst in Africa, haven't improved at all. And their lives haven't been improved at all.
Well, you can take a lesson out of Obama's own brother in Kenya, where he sat down and gave an interview and said that he believed that they shouldn't have pushed the whites out of Kenya so soon because look how poor they are. He believed if the white people had stayed longer, then they wouldn't be suffering so bad. And that's not my words. That's Barack Obama's own brother in Kenya that said it. So
there's always been political reasons. And not to say that the whites were blameless, there were atrocities committed when the whites were in charge of this country too. So, I mean, there's blame to be apportioned on both sides. Unfortunately, the politicians and global powers utilize those racial differences as they're trying to do to you guys there as well. It's exactly a pattern that we've seen here for the past 50 years, if not longer.
And I think that's why I'm thankful and grateful that I heard you that day that you called into 412 show. I did something I'm not normally known for, which is I started to DM and everybody there. Can you get in touch with this man for me? And it because again, it's really hard to get information out of South Africa that you can trust. So just like Daddy Dragon brings it from the UK, I feel like we need someone like you to bring it from South Africa, because you'll tell people the truth and it won't be manipulated like the media likes to do. We just need to know the truth. And like some of those videos that you've even sent me, they're impactful. They send a big message as to just the chaos. And I'll show this one. By the way, you'll get to see yourself on Foxhole quickly. You'll get to see this. Like, this is the one that kind of shook me the most, and I played it for Wednesday, but I'll share it again. Here's the kid.
Oh, Allah. Turn your face. I'm sorry, my angel. I'm so sorry.
Good, right, baby?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go.
I mean, that just kind of says it all, really. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, what you're driving. These are just people driving down the road, and they pan off to the other direction, and you saw the mob of people that just picked up whatever they could, bricks, whatever, and flung it at that car.
That lady, from her accent, is definitely Indian, Asian Indian. And there's a massive Asian Indian community on the East Coast. In fact, Gandhi himself actually came and worked here in the sugarcane fields. So, she was trying to protect her child.
Well, then I think that hopefully the next time maybe we can dive into the history. He sent me a lot of really, really good links to different articles. Again, I do think it's important that people understand the tribal breakdown of South Africa, because there is a lot to learn there. It's just not one massive, two massive groups of people that are fighting one another. It's a lot more diverse than that, with a lot richer history. You sent me stuff about like the concentration camps and what the British did in South Africa. I think all that stuff's kind of important for people to understand, because it plays into that that country's rich worth of history, and it seems like they're trying to erase a lot of it.
I think the term that you were looking for earlier was affirmative action.
Yeah, that's it, affirmative action. But yeah, we have the same thing here, but the affirmative action there is definitely impacting jobs. And you even, in that documentary I showed earlier, the white woman even said in that documentary, she says, well, we're paying for what our fathers or grandfathers did, and maybe this is some kind of form of justice in a way. And it's like, you can't penalize a group of people that did not do you wrong because you're mad at something that happened 50 years ago. If you want equality and you want to move forward and find peace, then you have to be the people that enacts that peace.
Exactly. Maybe as a parting shot, maybe I'll share my screen and perhaps we could show this video.
Sure. Affirmative action is a favor. Oh yeah. Well, we can't hear him, but it says favor the majority who has complete control of the facts that the political majority requires affirmative action to protect them against a 9% minority group is testament to complete failure on their part to build their own wealth, making structures such that their only solution is to take it from others. Finally, a word recently coined describes South Africa's current political situation: ineptocracy, the system of government where the least capable to lead are elected by the least capable of producing, where the members of society least likely to sustain themselves or succeed are rewarded with goods and services paid for by the confiscated wealth of a diminishing number of producers. Well, that man needs to be your damn president. I think he needs to be a president, KB.
Yeah.
Who was that?
That was, in fact, that was from the London Times. It was actually nice that they were honest for once.
And who was it that was speaking? We couldn't hear him, by the way. I'll have to show you how to share your audio when you're watching a video. But I read the words.
Yeah.
Who was it?
It just had music. That's the president of South Africa.
Oh, so he's the president now.
Yep, it's him.
So he's not in agreement with what they're doing.
Well, he's, there's double speak.
Oh, I was going to say, because I think maybe he'd do something to try and stop it. But, well, all right. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say he's probably more in favor of rooting out corruption based on the things we've seen, because had they not jailed somebody like Jacob Zuma the way they have, it would basically render their justice system more or less like what we have here at Banana Republic. There would be no justice.
Well, that's what they've effectively done by removing the Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court a month ago. So, it's like, controlling the FBI and getting them to investigate crimes. So, if you just see what's happening to people that were there on January the 6th and how they've been treated by the justice system, it's kind of like this kind of happened here, where they're going after their political opponents and taking cheap shots when they themselves are equally, if not more, guilty. So I'm not saying that Jacob Zuma is innocent of anything, but at the same time, he's clearly not the only one who's been putting his fingers into the cookie jar.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Well, I got to give a shout out. Thanks, Spirit Warrior, for the shades, and Nosy Poke for the can. If you don't know what that is, it's in Foxhole. I'm sure you've been here before. Yeah. And to Patty for the lemon. Appreciate the help there, and everybody on YouTube. We appreciate you. And middle finger to Susan Wojcicki for the demonetization for talking about the lab leak in Wuhan, and now it's common knowledge. But anyway, we won't hold a grudge. But I think that hopefully the next time we can hit on some of the like I said, the history there and trying to break down, because South Africa is such a beautiful place. I mean, it's just so sad to see the people's only retaliation is to burn the crap down to burn it down to the ground. But then what am I to say? You can take a trip through Portland, or some places in California and watch the same damn thing happening right now in America. So, and these idiots don't understand that the people are going to be the ones that have to pay to rebuild it. They're not burning down anything. They're not hurting the oligarch. They're not hurting the rich people. They have insurance. Or if they don't, trust me, they'll figure out a way to still make you pay for it.
Yeah, we're watching the same thing play out country by country, called creative destruction. And of course, they want to try and vilify one group against another, the typical divide and conquer tactics. Look over here, not over there. Never mind the fact that it's the string pullers behind the scenes where we need to direct our efforts at the end of the day.
Amen to that. It's interesting enough that most of our woes globally are courtesy thanks to the bankers and big pharma largely.
Yep.
Yeah, it's I know an ex-Crip said that he's from Durban where the looting's happening, said that people have been burnt alive. Yeah, I think again that gets into more of the history about what I'm talking about. Me and KB have talked about it offline, where people will hold up Nelson Mandela, these just great, wonderful, hero, but nobody talks about while he was in prison what his wife was doing on the outside, and we can get into that with necklacing and basically torturing people. They say you're only the man of the woman that walks behind you with anything that she did. Tells a story there as well. But again, people like to rewrite history. It's kind of like I said, mentioned the same thing they did with Libya. Nobody really talks about how great Libya was doing, because Hillary Clinton likes to attack the leader because, she took him out. But Hillary Clinton's history. And by the way, you was mentioned something about this before we left, breaking before we went on air. You might have mentioned it while we've been talking, but about Haiti, what's going on now with Haiti and South Africa, and now here in America. You mentioned it a while ago about kind of all the destruction happening everywhere. What was happening in Haiti?
Well, they're shaking out who exactly the assassins were, who they were tied to, and of course, I think we found out at some point this particular guy who has been penned as one of the shooters was tied to Sean Penn after the hurricane relief effort snapped back in 2010 and all that good stuff. So,
yeah, interesting. Sean Penn was just on Conan O'Brien's podcast talking about cancel culture. So there's that. Any of these people that go around there and sniff around like they're doing good, I don't know. I wish you could believe people, but unfortunately nowadays you should be skeptical and do your own research. But okay, well, with that, I think KB, I really appreciate you being here with us. Again, I think it's important. We want to do this on a regular basis. If you're up for it, people kind of get used to the time when it's a new time on the platform. They got to get used to you going live. But I think people will find your content interesting, learning about what's happening there, because it's important to me. All these countries where they think they can get away with this Marxism is where they push it first. And listen, I want the best for South Africa. I believe every country should be as free and as lucrative as America is supposed to be with our Constitution. That's a whole other story in itself, too, how that's been corrupted. And breaking could go on for 2 hours and talk about our judicial system and things of that nature. But we'll see. All right. But I think for now we'll sign off. I think that's probably enough for today. We've gone over quite a bit. And then hopefully, like I said, next time we can talk a little bit about the history there and how we got to where we are right now in South Africa. Unless you guys have anything else you want to add, go ahead.
Sassy out in D Live says, "Where can KB's content be found? Where do they find you at this point?"
Well, here, I guess. I haven't actually got my own channel. I don't. I've got all my content saved on my hard drive. Yeah, and
Telegram or anything along those lines, they can follow you, or
a lot of the stuff I've been putting on Telegram, I'm under Kimon B, KIMONB, and a lot of the content I've been putting out there has got to do with the scamdemic, less so about South Africa, and probably more about the US. And just a shout out to Laura, to you, Breaking, and Tien, and all the good folk out there who have been the campfire around which many truth seekers have gathered. And I really appreciate what you do. And I think the little journalists that you've created around the world, the digital soldiers that you've encouraged from your work, encouraged me to get in touch and get the South African story out there, and to show the parallels of what's happening within your country. And it's something that we've discussed off air, and perhaps for another time, but the beacon of hope for the majority of patriots outside of the US is the US. And it's based around your constitution, and perhaps we could do a show solely on that. So we look to you. Your success is actually ultimately ours. The way we see it is that you're the dividing line between good and evil at the moment.
Well, and of course we know too from our days of following Q, whether you choose to believe in it, conspiracy theory, otherwise, whatever, we definitely know that the content of the material that came by way of that, there is worldwide support behind it. How many times did we see posts where they're donning Q material, make America great, or make their respective country great again, as a result of the information that was being dispelled? So we definitely know that there's worldwide support for what's going on. There is a reason why they've said that, the U.S. is kind of the shining beacon on the hill, if you will, and there is no other place to run to aside from that, no other bastion of freedom and hope.
Yeah, when I met KB, he informed me that he focused a lot on American politics, and I drug him and I didn't really drag. I don't think that's probably not the appropriate word, but I requested that he come on and talk about South Africa because I appreciate that he follows American politics, but I really think that it's important that we hear from these other parts of the world and what's happening in their country. And I cannot trust the media to tell me. So if I can find someone that lives there that I can trust to give us the truth, and that's what my mission is to find someone like KB that lives in South Africa, that has friends that can send him information, and then we can get it through him. So, we have a lot of people here covering American politics. We don't have that many people in South Africa talking about South African politics. So, that's why I think it's important.
In fact, I think possibly on the next time we can get on, there are one or two people that I've introduced you to, and perhaps we could bring them on. The one in particular was actually fleeing Cape Town with her mom to go about 3 hours out of here. So she would have possibly joined us. And she's got some great content. She's actually done some film work herself and has had one or two crews around the country doing various things. So yeah, and you'll get a really well-balanced view. I think the bottom line is that just like majority of countries in the world, the average person is decent people, regardless of your color. People just want to get on with life, feed their children, put a roof over their head, and go to work. Nothing more, nothing less. And
I did reach out to the first person that you had sent me. I won't say any names, but they did reach back out. And of course, I said this, I'll say this private, I'll say it public. The more South Africans I can meet, the better. Again, I lost touch with my main contact, the one that I maybe rebroadcast that interview here. It's a couple of years old, but it's still very relevant. And when I lost touch with him, it was heartbreaking to me because he just informed me so much and educated me about what's happening there that I missed those conversations. So I've been looking for someone like KB for, again, I'm not kidding, close to 2 years, that lives there, that knows about the politics, that knows the geography, knows the breakdown of how all this started. I love people that know the history of their land. So yeah, I will most definitely, I've already reached out to the one. I haven't the second one, but I'm all in making this a big melting pot, a big round table of you guys. And I would hand you the mic and say, you two discuss it. You guys tell us everything that's going on because, you're better at speaking about your country than I am, and I think you get two people in a room to talk about it. The information just kind of flows. But yeah, so I look forward to it. I look forward to she actually reached back out to me. I think she's a little busy today. So I look forward to speaking with her. And you are, we'll do this again. I'm going to try and make this a regular thing because nothing's changing in South Africa. That means we need to stop paying attention to it. And that's always bothered me. After the Trump tweeted about it, everybody paid attention to South Africa. Farmlands came out by Lauren Southern. If you've not saw that, I suggest you go look it up. It's worth watching. And then it just kind of, South Africa nobody talked about it anymore. It was just like the news cycle went on by and South Africa got left in the dust. But it's not like peace all of a sudden was created and this stuff just stopped happening. People just stopped talking about it. Which if I can do anything, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to bring this back up and we're going to talk about South Africa. And it doesn't have to come from me. It can come from KB and I can bring his counterparts on. That's what I care about, is the information getting out there. But enough about that. So go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I certainly appreciate the opportunity to actually get the message out there for South Africa. And I think ultimately what will happen over time, you'll see that there are so many parallels to what has happened here to what is currently happening in the US, and it all stems from left-wing Marxist ideology, socialism, and cultural Marxism, which is really the aim is to divide us into all kinds of factions and groups, which they love doing. I look forward to actually being on again, and once again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, wait till I get you Breaking and Daddy Dragon in a room. I'll just sit back and eat my popcorn and watch the flames fly because I can make that happen. I'm going to make that happen. You two, you three get into a pretty interesting conversation. Breaking knows this stuff about the finance and the corruption here in America. Daddy knows what's happening over in the UK. I'll throw you in from South Africa. I'm sure it'll be an interesting conversation.
I was privileged to have an hour with Tien yesterday. So it was really cool, yeah. And
Hope Center's great.
Yeah, he's a good man. He's brings a lot of common sense to the discussion, and I can understand why Breaking Tien and John Pinata do so well together.
Yep, they all have that very analytical thinking mind. I'm the jester in the back corner, but listen, I'm passionate about certain things, and South Africa is one of them, and I don't want to keep saying that, but I mean it, and hopefully anybody that knows me knows when I say it, I mean it. So I just don't want South Africa's news to be left out the dust. It shouldn't be. It's important. Everybody needs to be paying attention to what's happening over there. But and we'll do this again soon. Hopefully I'll get in touch with her. I'll get in touch with Daddy, but I would like to do something with UKB where it's not too convoluted, and it can be you or her. I don't care about actually diving into the history of what all has happened there, because it's the same thing that's here. We don't hear enough about slavery in America. It's all pushed on one race, and it's not talked about enough. What's happened with the Irish, the Native Americans, the Dutch, the English. So it's the same kind of thing to me in South Africa. The actual history of South Africa, they're trying to rewrite it. So if we can get some kind of inventory library of actual events, I would appreciate that personally.
What I will do is I've got 1 or 2 videos on global slavery, etc., because it interests me as well, and maybe just add to your library. But to all your viewers, thank you. God bless you all, and thank you.
All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good night. Look for us again. I'll title it something South Africa, and maybe next time we'll have other people in the room so they can get into the America, UK, South Africa side. Again, we'll talk about some of the history, and hopefully we can bring on some of KB's friends that are also in South Africa so we can get their take on what's going on. And Breaking, as always, I don't have Daddy here, so you got to do it.
Sorry, I was trying to type to somebody in chat here. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.